los veía a los ingleses como venían, querían subir para arriba, y nosotros estamos arriba. Y le dije al subteniente, que era subteniente de ese entonces, Esteban Amadrili, y al sargento Tito Echeverría, le digo, váyanse porque tienen hijos ustedes, yo no. Me quedé solo.
Soledad Island, Malvinas, Argentina, 1982. A cold and desolate plain. In the distance, the fire momentarily illuminates the silhouettes of young soldiers running amidst screams and gunshots. There, under the deafening sound of shrapnel and explosions, a single man is preparing to face an army. He is not a veteran soldier or someone with combat experience. He is Óscar Poltronieri, an Argentine conscript of just 19 years old. Alone, with nothing but his machine gun and an unwavering conviction, Óscar will become the shield of his comrades, facing the British attack that seeks to destroy his unit. The Battle of Monte Dos Hermanas was one of the fiercest and most crucial confrontations of the Malvinas War, a true hell on earth in which the fate of the Argentine troops hung in the balance. At this strategic point, where the height dominated the surrounding terrain, much more than a simple territorial advance was decided. The resistance of the South American country against the relentless British offensive was at stake. Under the extreme cold and a rain of shrapnel, young and exhausted soldiers clung to their positions, knowing that their defeat would open the way to the heart of the Argentine defenses. The tension was unbearable. The explosions lit up the darkness like lightning, and the enemy advanced like an unstoppable attack. In this desperate context, where survival seemed impossible, the bravery of heroes like Óscar Poltronieri would emerge, who challenged British power with courage and an unbreakable will.
Yo lo entré a buscar y no estaba. Entonces miró hacia atrás y él estaba apoyado contra una especie de roca y él tiraba. Yo le estaba, vamos, Oscar, vamos. Yo le decía que volviera, y él dice que no, me quedo, bueno. Y ahí lo pierdo de vista yo.
In this military history video, we will explore the life of a man as ordinary as he was extraordinary, who would go on to be decorated with the highest distinctions of the Argentine army. Let's start with the story of Óscar Poltronieri. He was born and raised in Mercedes, Buenos Aires, in a modest family. Life in the countryside was difficult, and from a young age he learned to deal with the physical effort and difficulties inherent in the rural environment. Óscar's days were marked by hard work and the responsibilities of helping out at home. He grew up in contact with the land, livestock, and daily effort. Due to his environment, he was formed with a strong and resilient character, qualities that, although he did not yet know it, would be crucial later on. At 19, Óscar was called up for compulsory military service. Like so many other young men, his duty as a conscript led him to join the army. Without any great expectations, he thought that his service would involve a simple training routine. However, fate had other plans. On April 2, 1982, Argentina took control of the Falkland Islands, a disputed territory in the South Atlantic that had been in the works since the 19th century. The Latin American country claimed sovereignty over the islands, while the United Kingdom, which had administered them since 1833, sent a powerful military force to reclaim them. Thus, Poltronieri, along with thousands of young Argentines, was sent to a conflict in one of the most remote points on the map, changing his life forever. The war was brief but devastating. In just 10 weeks, some of the bloodiest and most brutal fighting in Argentine history took place. The young conscripts sent to the islands did not have adequate training or the necessary equipment for modern warfare. The weather conditions were extreme, and supply and communication logistics were limited. In this context of disadvantage, Óscar Poltronieri and his comrades from the 6th Mechanized Infantry Regiment found themselves on Monte Dos Hermanas, a key terrain in the Argentine defense. The mountain had become a strategic point, as its elevated position allowed it to control a good part of the surrounding territory. The British knew that they had to take this place to ensure their advance towards other Argentine positions. This made Monte Dos Hermanas a stage that would inevitably lead to a confrontation between the two countries. The Battle of Monte Dos Hermanas was an emblematic episode in the Falklands War. The British troops, highly trained and well-equipped, advanced with determination. Unlike the young Argentines, who had limited resources, the British soldiers carried with them state-of-the-art weapons, as well as having leadership experienced in combat. The difference between the two forces was evident, both in terms of weapons and preparation. The Argentine soldiers, mostly young and inexperienced, faced a desperate situation, and the extreme climate of the islands only aggravated their situation.
Y cuando miro, veo que estaba en medio del bombardeo, entre las rocas estaban los ojitos de mis soldados, se veía con las bengalas la parte blanca de sus ojos, todos mirándome a mí esperando órdenes. Y lo más conmovedor es que si había un momento para irse, era ese. Yo no iba a contar a los soldados que subían conmigo. Yo iba a decir seguirme y que me sigan.
In the midst of this hostile scenario, Poltronieri and his comrades were ordered to resist. The strategy was clear: hold their position as long as possible to slow down the British advance. Gunshots and explosions began to fill the air, and the darkness of the night was intermittently illuminated by the flashes of the explosions. The noise of the battle was deafening. The Argentine soldiers, poorly armed and exhausted by hours of tension, did their best to resist, but the enemy's advance was unstoppable. At that critical moment when everything seemed lost and the shots resounded like thunder in the cold Malvinas night, Poltronieri made a decision that would change the course of events in a way as unexpected as it was brave. His unit, overwhelmed by the British advance, retreated with each passing second. The order was clear: retreat before the defense line collapsed. However, Poltronieri, with his eyes fixed on his comrades, made a radical decision: to stay behind alone to cover their retreat.
¿Por qué les dijiste que se fueran?
Porque le había llegado una carta que hacía hace poquito tenía familia la señora, y entonces yo le decía que se fueran, que ellos tenían hijos, yo no.
There was no time for doubt or despair. In the midst of the darkness, between the whistling of bullets and the echo of explosions, Óscar held his machine gun tightly and took on the task of resisting. He was not thinking about himself, or his life, or the danger he was in. He only wanted to give his comrades the opportunity to escape, even if it meant facing the enemy in an impossible battle. Each bullet fired by Poltronieri was an act of defiance and a promise that he would not surrender until the last of his comrades was safe. With the deafening sound of gunfire and the cold that penetrated to the bones, this young Argentinian remained firm in his position, determined to face a much more powerful army. The enemy advanced in ranks, certain of their victory, but Poltronieri, with a mixture of fury and bravery, began to fire without ceasing. Each burst of his machine gun was a declaration of resistance, a war cry that resonated in the silence of the night. The British soldiers, surprised by the intensity of their resistance, were forced to stop and regroup. Poltronieri, meanwhile, continued to fire, changing position to avoid being hit. His goal was not to defeat the enemy, but to buy the time necessary for his comrades to escape. He knew he was risking his life, but that didn't seem to matter to him at the moment. Adrenaline and the desire to protect his comrades drove him forward.
Yo me di cuenta que empezaba a quedarme sin bocas de fuego, que empezaba a haber heridos. Yo me arrastré y le pedí al soldado Gómez que con el lanzacohete, el cañón de 90 milímetros que tenía, que tirara esa ametralladora, la del sargento Jackson, que nos tenía aferrados. Gómez me contestó que no tenía más proyectiles, tenía solamente el lanzacohete. Entonces putié de bronca, le dije tirá ese cañón a la miércoles, y empecé a tirar con buscate un fusil, empecé a tirar con un fusil, porque la apuntadora del lanzacohete lleva pistola, no fusil. Buscate un fusil de algún muerto, empecé a tirar con un fusil, cosa que Gómez hizo, y empecé a ver cómo replegaba yo mismo, pues ya no tenía bocas de fuego.
The British advanced confidently, convinced that Argentine resistance was weak and that the defensive lines had collapsed. But then, unexpectedly intense fire began to slow their advance. They thought they were facing an entire unit hidden among the rocks, but what they did not know was that this ferocious attack came from a single man, Óscar Poltronieri. Moving quickly between positions, he fired precise bursts from his machine gun, constantly changing position to create the illusion of a large group.
Entonces yo le tiraba hacía ráfaga y todo y no dejaba tirar, que se asomaran para tirarle a los compañeros míos que estaban ahí subiendo para el otro lado. Y como no podían avanzar, entonces ¿qué hacen? Se vuelven para atrás, porque después ellos parecían que había una compañía ahí. Y resulta que estaba solo, yo me le movía por un lado para el otro.
Finally, after hours of intense resistance, Poltronieri achieved his objective. His companions were able to get to safety. Exhausted, with his body worn out and his hands shaking, Óscar also retreated, leaving behind the mountain that he had defended with his life. The battle at Monte Dos Hermanas had left a deep mark on all those who participated in it. But Poltronieri had done something exceptional. His feat was recognized in the following days, when his companions told what had happened. They could not believe that this humble and simple young man had faced an entire army alone. The news of his bravery reached the ears of his superiors. Finally, the Argentine army decided to award him the highest military distinction in the country. Poltronieri became the only conscript soldier to receive this decoration, an honor reserved only for those who demonstrate extraordinary courage on the battlefield.
Soy el único que tengo la Cruz, la Nación Argentina al Heroico Valor en Combate, que es esta, que tengo acá en mi pecho. Soy el único soldado, son 6 oficiales y un soldado. Porque fui destacado, me dieron 2 veces por muerto y las 2 veces aparecí en diferentes lugares con la ametralladora.
Óscar Poltronieri returned to Argentina as a hero, but his life after the war was not easy. Óscar maintained ties with various ex-combatants and even became friends with a British soldier who participated in the conflict. The war placed them on opposite sides, but time and maturity gave them the opportunity to find in each other someone who understands better than anyone the weight of those extreme moments.
La guerra me dejó algo más importante. Que un enemigo es un amigo, es un hermano.
Estás hablando del soldado británico que hoy es casi un hermano para vos.
Like many veterans, Poltronieri struggled to adapt to civilian life and witnessed the neglect to which many of his comrades were subjected. The war left him with scars, both physical and emotional, that would accompany him for the rest of his life. Despite this, Óscar never considered himself a hero. For him, what he did at Monte Dos Hermanas was simply fulfilling his duty and protecting his comrades.
Eso es lo que me dejó la guerra, mejor dicho.
Contame cómo está Malvinas en tu corazón.
Sé que Malvinas es un sentimiento para mí.
Poltronieri's bravery reminds us that true heroism lies not in seeking glory, but in being willing to sacrifice everything for others. His act of valor is an example of dedication and commitment that inspires entire generations of Argentines and people around the world. Óscar Poltronieri's legacy is a reminder of the humanity that underlies the darkest conflicts. Amid the brutality of war, he found the strength to do the right thing, facing a much more powerful enemy without hesitation. His story lives on, not only as a chapter in Argentine history, but as a testimony that, even in the most difficult times, there is always room for courage and compassion. Although the dispute over the Falkland Islands remains unresolved, Argentina continues to appeal to dialogue and peaceful means to achieve a shared sovereignty agreement or a path to the recovery of the islands. This is what Óscar Poltronieri and all his fellow veterans wish, to honor his memory and that of his fallen comrades. Now, after learning about the incredible life of this hero of the Malvinas War, the time has come to say goodbye. Thank you very much for having accompanied us until the end. We look forward to seeing you again in our next military history video.